hours.
The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you compliments of KFC. It's finger licking good. With the news, I am Ruth Wilson. Good evening. First, the highlights. A communication breakdown led to a slow emergency response to the distressed trawler that subsequently sank. And a Venezuelan man has been stabbed to death. In the region, Suriname has lifted its COVID measures. Details of these and other stories, including international news from the BBC, in a moment.
Hit to standing lines? Don't worry. KFC has got you covered with their drive-thrus, which are open now from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. at Movietown, Vlissingen Road, Mandela Avenue, Reading Hoop, Parika, and the Amazonia Mall. That's right, you can drive through at 6 of their 9 locations. Remember, their current opening hours are 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. Go on down and let your taste buds savor the spices today. KFC.
It's finger licking good.
And now for the news in detail. As families await word about the disappearance of 3 fishermen after a seabob trawler sank off the coast of Maikoni early Saturday morning, officials on Monday said emergency response was hampered by the late delivery of information to authorities. Director General of the Maritime Administration, Captain Stephen Thomas, said nearby vessels did not receive distress radio messages on the emergency communication channel from the ill-fated trawler World Friend 307.
If we had gotten, for instance, a report, then we would have just inform vessels that there's a vessel with a potential problem, and they would have started closing in on the area. But as I said, we had nothing of that nature in this instance.
The MARAD Director General says he received information about the trawler at about 6:45 Saturday evening, although officials were informed that Noble House Seafoods received information about 5:30 Saturday morning. Those missing are the vessel's captain, 45-year-old Harold Anthony Damon, 78-year-old Ronald Burton, and 46-year-old Winston Sam. Winston Dazzle was rescued in a life raft by fishermen and reported the mishap to police and the company. A Venezuelan man has been stabbed to death and the alleged perpetrator has since been arrested. The dead man has been identified as 29-year-old Dr. Eduardo Gonzalez. The incident occurred at Ragu Sports Bar on the Soosdijk Junction shortly before 10 o'clock Saturday night. Investigators were informed that the victim was with his brother and several friends at the bar when the assailant approached the victim. During the altercation, the suspect stabbed Eduardo Gonzalez to his right side chest, which caused the victim to fall to the ground. Eduardo Gonzalez was rushed to the Diamond Diagnostic Center, where he was pronounced dead at 12:35 Sunday morning. Quick action by the police led to the suspect being apprehended and placed in custody as investigations continue. Lloyd's Register, LR, and Matpal Marine Institute Incorporated, a maritime and oil and gas education training and support center, have signed a memorandum of understanding to jointly support safe maritime training in Guyana. As part of the Memorandum of Understanding, Matpal will promote and host LR training courses in its training center. Training courses will include ship emergency response service, risk management, and incident investigation and practical approach to ship surveys, amongst others. The Memorandum of Understanding will focus on local content development in Guyana and support oil and gas companies to navigate requirements in the region. This follows recent plans by the Guyana government to equip 4,000 young people with the necessary technical and vocational skills to help employment. Guyana's COVID death toll is now 1,213, but there is a sharp decline in the number of new cases and overall active cases. The health ministry says 2 more persons who were not vaccinated have died from the viral disease. At the same time, official figures show a steady reduction in the number of new cases. Within the past 24 hours, 12 new cases have been recorded. Guyana now has 840 active cases, with 68 of them hospitalized and 772 told to isolate themselves at home to avoid spreading the disease. The Health Ministry also says that of those hospitalized, 11 of them are very sick and are receiving intensive care. You're still with us on News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. It is 18 hours 5. We now turn to news in the region. A medical practitioner says she remains confident after a High Court judge last weekend ordered the immediate reinstatement of her resignation and practicing certificate. She had been suspended after she had been found to be prescribing and supplying the drug ivermectin to patients affected by the coronavirus pandemic. Last December, the outspoken medical practitioner was suspended for 6 months by the St. Lucia Medical and Dental Council. This was after indicating that she had been prescribing and supplying ivermectin to patients without authorization from the Ministry of Health or the Chief Medical Officer and publicly encouraging its use to treat the virus. The Caribbean Media Corporation reports that last Friday, the council representatives were not present at the High Court when the matter came up before Justice Rohan Phillip, who later ruled to reinstate Dr. Rose's registration and practicing certificate and stay the council's decision until the determination of the case. The matter comes up for hearing on April 28 this year. Ivermectin is an antiparasitic drug most commonly used to treat livestock. It is US FDA approved for humans when treating lice, rosacea, and specific parasitic diseases, but not for COVID-19. The World Health Organization, WHO, says the current evidence on the use of ivermectin to treat COVID-19 patients is inconclusive. News just in locally. The man who allegedly shot dead his son-in-law has been captured. Police Crime Chief Wendell Blanham was held earlier today. He's accused of the shooting death of 25-year-old Leon Gittings of 118 Cowan Street, Kingston. The incident occurred in East La Penitence when Gittings went to visit his girlfriend. The perpetrator was dressed in a wig and dress when he opened fire on Gittings. Now back to regional news. Suriname today lifted curfew imposed as part of the measures aimed at curbing the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. Health Minister Amar Ramadan said maintaining the lockdown makes no sense now because the curfew does not make any additional contribution to the current wave. The authorities said that the ban on people gathering has been increased from 10 to 50, but that parties remain prohibited and that clubs, among other things, are still not allowed to open. Justice and Police Minister Kenneth Amuxi and Police Commissioner Orlando Jacot said as a result of the new measures, the authorities will step up their control and enforcement. The Caribbean Media Corporation says that Amuxi appealed to society not to abuse the relaxation and to behave responsibly. Ramadan said he believes it remains important to maintain a balance in current COVID-19 care and to scale up regular care. COVID-19 has killed 1,310 and infected 77,716 others in the Dutch-speaking Caribbean nation since March of 2020. The Caribbean Community Caricom Secretariat is this week training Antigua and Barbuda immigration officials on the movement of Caricom nationals and the facilitation of travel. The online training will be for 2.5 days, from the 22nd to the 23rd of February 2022, and will focus on the legal basis for the movement of skilled nationals, the Caricom complaints procedure, and the role of immigration departments in facilitating the free movement of people. Other topics on the agenda cover administrative practices and procedures that govern the movement of service providers and an update on Antigua and Barbuda's status regarding implementation of the free movement of people within the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, CSME. There will be approximately 25 participants in the training session, which is part of the Caricom Secretariat's program of activities engaging stakeholders across the region on the CSME. An assessment will be done on the impact of rising cost of living in St. Martin. Dutch State Secretary of Kingdom Relations Alexandra van Huffelen says authorities will examine the possibility of a 12.5% reduction in employment benefits of civil servants and semi-public sector entities. Those benefits had been instituted as one of the conditions for liquidity support that the country received to help buffer the effects of the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. Van Huffelen's remarks on the assessment and cuts was in response to a question on whether consideration was given to remove the 12.5% cuts. The State Secretary said the issue of the cuts had been raising during her meetings in St. Martin as well as in the past, and she realizes that it is not easy on workers. She said the assessment that will be done should be completed by the spring of this year. On the issue of possible liquidity support for the second quarter, she said nothing to this effect has been agreed to. At 18:11, we now bring you international news from the BBC.
This is the BBC News with Fiona MacDonald. President Putin has signed a decree recognising the independence of two breakaway regions of Ukraine, controlled by Russian-backed separatists. In a televised address, he said the Donetsk and Luhansk areas were ancient Russian territories and described the Ukrainian government as a puppet regime controlled by foreign powers.
Считаю необходимым принять уже давно назревшее решение.
I consider it necessary to take a long overdue decision to immediately recognise the independence and sovereignty of the Donetsk People's Republic and the Lugansk People's Republic. I ask the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation to support this decision and then ratify the Treaty of Friendship and Mutual Assistance in connecting the two republics. These documents will be prepared and signed in the very near future.
Mr. Putin's speech was highly critical of NATO and Western countries. He said NATO training centres in Ukraine amounted to military bases for the alliance. There's been widespread international condemnation of Vladimir Putin's announcement. The White House says President Joe Biden will issue an order placing sanctions on people operating in the breakaway areas of Ukraine. The European Union described the recognition of the territories as a blatant violation of international law. Here's our Europe regional editor, Danny Eberhard.
Western leaders are in intensive consultation following Mr. Putin's speech. The White House said it had anticipated such a move and that President Biden would prohibit investments, trade and financing by US citizens in the separatist-held regions. Mr. Biden has been holding conversations with allies, including Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, who's called a meeting of his Security Council. The head of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, accused Russia of trying to stage a pretext to again invade Ukraine, but repeated a call for the Kremlin to choose diplomacy. Elsewhere, the reaction has been stronger. The European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, called it a blatant violation of international law and the Minsk agreements.
The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said Mr. Putin's move was plainly in breach of international law. He said he was concerned.
It's a very ill omen and a very dark sign. It's certainly yet another indication that things are moving in the wrong direction. The UK will continue to do everything we can to stand by the people of Ukraine with a very robust package of sanctions, but also being one of the few countries to have given the Ukrainians defensive weaponry.
The British government has announced that England's remaining COVID laws will be abandoned. Boris Johnson told Parliament it was time to rely on vaccinations and treatments to control the pandemic, rather than government intervention. This is the latest world news from the BBC. Jordan's royal palace has described leaks about hundreds of millions of dollars held by King Abdullah in Swiss bank accounts as inaccurate, old and misleading. The leaked data, which contained details of thousands of accounts at the bank Credit Suisse, suggested that the King of Jordan had at least 6 accounts, with one more than $250 million. The royal palace said the reports were overblown. The former president of Peru, Ollanta Humala, has appeared in court for his first hearing since being charged 3 years ago with corruption. Prosecutors say he received millions of dollars in illegal campaign donations from the Brazilian construction firm Odebrecht, which he denies. Legislators in Mali have voted unanimously to allow the military to rule for up to 5 years. Elections had been due last month but were cancelled by the country's military leaders. That triggered economic sanctions from the African regional group ECOWAS. No date has been set for future polls. The army dominates Mali's legislature. The Chilean government is returning to Easter Island one of the huge stone statues removed from there in 1870. The monolith depicting a human figure will be taken by ship on a 5-day journey to the remote Pacific island. Warren Boole reports.
The moai of Easter Island were carved by Polynesian settlers more than 500 years ago, but in the 19th century, many were expropriated by scientists and adventurers. This one, weighing 700 kilos and known as Moai Tau, was taken to Santiago in 1870, where it became the oldest example in Chile's National History Museum, until now. Members of the Rapa Nui indigenous community held a traditional ceremony outside the museum to mark the start of its journey home. For many years, the Rapa Nui have demanded the return of all statues taken from Easter Island, including one that's at the British Museum in London.
BBC News.
And that's the news to the moment.
KFC delivery is now available from the Amazonia location. For shore-based Little Diamond residents, call 632-0533, 632-0533, 6080-162, 6080-162, or 503-3591, 503-3591. That's KFC's delivery service from the Amazonia location. KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
To end the news, here's a recap of the highlights. A communication breakdown led to a slow emergency response to the distressed trawler that subsequently sank. A Venezuelan man has been stabbed to death. And news just in, the man who allegedly shot dead his son-in-law has been captured. And in the region, Suriname has lifted its COVID measures. The news came to you compliments of KFC. It's finger-licking good.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.